Hello, 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 and welcome back to Sikich Live on this beautiful Thursday. Go ahead and hit that subscribe and like button so that you can get all the notifications for when we go live every single Thursday at 2:30 Central Time each week with a new exciting topic about ERP, IT managed services, security, CRM, and so much more. Before I bring on our Sikich Live guest today, I do want to remind everyone to not be shy. Go into the chat box, ask us questions. That's why we're live. That's why we're here, so that we can answer your questions ASAP in this moment. Today, we are talking a little bit about data migration in NetSuite, and specifically for the life science industry, although there are elements here today that apply to all industries that need vital data migration. But as it is vital, sometimes it can be, of course, challenging. And it's a challenging step in implementing any enterprise resource planning software or ERP. More specifically for today's topic, NetSuite ERP. The data migration process can be complex and time-consuming. It's important to plan carefully and do it right. Underestimating the time and effort required can delay an entire ERP implementation. So who better to help you through this process than Sikich and Suite App partner in the Black Software. We have Paul Giese and Liz Keefe, or Elizabeth Keefe, I should say. Welcome to Sikich Live, and thanks for being here with me today. Really quick, I'd love to get a quick intro from you both. Ladies first, of course. Liz?
Perfect. Thanks, Michael. So my name is Liz Keefe, and I am a client engagement manager on our NetSuite team. So I work primarily with our life science clients. I project manage the implementations from start to finish, and then once they're live, I continue that relationship with them. And I become their account manager. So I'm really with them, through the whole kind of life cycle as a Sikich client. Great.
And Paul?
Great. Yeah, thanks, Mike. As you said, my name is Paul Giese. I'm the founder of In the Black Consulting. And we really help clients move their data into NetSuite at a detailed transaction level, which is, typically, more difficult to do manually in Excel. And I've partnered with Sikich for several years now and helped with about 10 to 15 biotech implementations over that time period. And I'm excited to be here to share some insight and tips and tricks on how to make the data migration process a little bit easier.
Great. Well, let's get right into it. Liz, can you give us an overview of how Sikich handles data migration?
Yeah, perfect. So like you said, data migration is really one of our most popular topics of conversations during a new implementation. So we really get into it during our planning calls and NetSuite kickoff calls. So to simplify it for our clients who are, kind of new and, kind of anxious to get started, we break it up into two parts. So we have the master records and then the actual data conversion. So the master records, is made up of the chart of accounts, the segments. We define segments as departments, classes, locations, and sometimes projects. Vendors and employees also fall under the master records. So we do these first. We get the templates over to our client as soon as possible because the master records go hand in hand with the configurations. So we really define, what segment structure the clients will be using during our solution alignment, which is the initial meeting where we design their system. So once we have that all figured out, we hand the templates over to the client and then they fill them out. In some cases, they use Paul and he fills them out for them. But then they get them back to us and we upload them right away because, like I said, it is one of the first steps of the project. Then later in the project comes the data migration. So that's made up of historical information, historical data, and then maybe any open transactions. So what we typically see in the life science space is clients bring over about 2 years of history from QuickBooks, whether that's detail or, just a high level kind of summary. That's up to them. And then they also bring over open AP and sometimes fixed assets. So that is hand in hand with the actual go live process. And we do it at the last minute possible so they can have pretty much all of their data from QuickBooks in NetSuite. And then we work with them, throughout the month, tying things out and then eventually helping them close out the month, which is pretty much the end goal. So from a high level, that's pretty much the breakdown of how we see data migration at Sikich.
Great. So, Paul, one common question that we get frequently is, what can I do to get ready for an implementation, right? What would you say to that?
Yeah, so specifically for the data migration side, as Liz mentioned, the first step is really the master records. And so oftentimes that includes your chart of accounts. So if you're like the second or third accounting team at your company, oftentimes the chart of accounts has been, you've had accounts that maybe are no longer used or have been inactivated. And so I think taking the time to clean that up and merge as many of those accounts together can be really helpful in having a good sense of like, what do I want my chart of accounts to look like in a new ERP? So when you implement in NetSuite, it's a good opportunity to review that chart of accounts and make it kind of a fresh start, so to speak, in how you structure the GL accounts. Another good thing to be thinking about is your department and your program structure. So it's very common for clients to be using the class segment in QuickBooks to track their G&A and their R&D spend for GAAP purposes. But I think thinking about how you want additional departments for budget purposes to be tracking, to be kind of preparing and thinking about, in my G&A section, do I want to have an accounting department, an IT department, an investor relations department, those kind of things. And then you can also in QuickBooks, as you kind of build out that segment structure, you can reclassify transactions pretty easily in QuickBooks. That's they have a nice tool in QuickBooks Online where you can move those transactions. So those are a few things that I'd really recommend that clients begin to at least think about, so that when they have that initial conversation with their Sikich team, they're ready and they've thought through what they would like their segment structure to look like in their new system.
Sure. So what are some bigger tips and tricks for making that smooth data migration, and maybe specifically for the life science industry?
Mm-hmm. So I think that keeping your segment structure as simple as possible to start is really important. So you don't want to over-engineer your segment structure when you're getting a new ERP system, unless you already have a really strong sense for how your team and how you're going to be budgeting by department is going to look like. So you want to keep it simple, but set it up so that it can evolve and can expand easily for future growth. I think that's really important. I think second, when you're talking about the transactions history, you want to make sure that you don't keep two sets of books in QuickBooks and NetSuite after your go live. I think I've had clients that have tried to do this, and this can be extremely difficult because you have to maintain two sets of books. And if you document your data migration well, you will be able to get your auditors comfortable that the migration occurred correctly, and you'll be able to tie everything out from QuickBooks to NetSuite. It can be really challenging to go back and figure out which transaction was posted in NetSuite but not in QuickBooks. That I've seen, and I've helped clients with kind of picking that out, and it's like finding a needle in a haystack. It can be really challenging. Another thing I'd highly recommend for clients is that once you've loaded all of that data on your go live weekend or the Monday of go live, is to export all of your transactions before you start entering live transactions, and that helps get your auditors comfortable when they sort of to create your opening trial balance for your auditors. So this will really show, hey, these are the transactions that create my opening TB in NetSuite, because you won't be able to recreate that opening TB in NetSuite once you're posting live transactions in the system. And I think another thing that I'd recommend, is adding a custom field to all your imported transactions from your legacy system. So that way you can kind of see, okay, well, this was a transaction that we loaded as part of the data migration, and it wasn't a live transaction in the system. And then finally, I'd say, for your open AR and your open AP transactions, you want to make sure and create a fictitious open AP vendor or open AR customer, so that you avoid having that no vendor on your AP or your AR aging detail. That's one of those things that it's annoying to see that on your system. And if you include that segment on there, it's really easy to mark that as paid, and then it's off, and you don't have to think about it ever again. I remember at Surface Oncology, we kept a couple of those on because that was my first implementation, and I didn't know that, and it was sitting in there for years until we finally did actually clean it up. And so one of those tips and tricks that you just want, knowing that ahead of time can just help make everything as clean as possible.
Sure. So, well, I have another question. So data is, of course, so valuable to so many companies, and security is a really big thing. Do you have any, maybe it's tips and tricks or any experience or with the security behind the data being transferred? Are there backups, archives, or is the data really secure during this whole transition process?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you want to make sure you have, backups. If you're using QuickBooks Online, then your data, is backed up by Intuit, and NetSuite is, backed up by Oracle. And as part of the, your data migration, you're probably doing that in Excel. And so I would recommend, keeping that in a secure environment. For any Excel files that you're working in, if you're an accountant, you basically live in Excel, right? So, I think the main thing is you want to make sure you have really good documentation for your auditors, so that you can easily see, like, this is what we did, this is why we did it, this is how we mapped our legacy segments from QuickBooks, and this is how they mapped to the new segments in NetSuite. And I think it's just really important to have as much of that documented as possible.
Very cool. Yeah, excellent. Well, I don't have any other questions here. So I do want to thank Liz and Paul for being here with us today, talking a little bit more about that data migration, especially data migration with Sikich using In the Black software tool. So Paul, we thank you for being here today. If anybody has any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to either Liz or Paul on their LinkedIn profiles. I'm sure they'd be happy to chat with you there, as well as reaching out to info@sikich.com or our website at sikich.com. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Liz and Paul, we'll see you next time.
Bye. Awesome.
Thank you.